How much ILV do you need staked to live comfortably? Okay, I'm breaking down America and Australia here. I've got some really interesting numbers. You can take a lot of it with a grain of salt. They're based on some research data and kind of some estimations on the ILV side, but I am using a range of different estimates. So you can take what you will. You can look at the different data and decide for yourself how you think ILV is going to play out. Obviously, do not invest into ILV because of any of this. Everyone's financial situation is different. Everyone's risk tolerance is different, and it makes a big impact to your financial decision. So with that, it doesn't need to be said, but this is not financial advice. So take all of this how you will, but there's a lot of interesting data to break down. So let's jump straight into it. So the American states, basically, I only took 6 of them. If you guys want me to add more, let me know in the comments. Maybe I'll make another video. It'll be really funny. But a lot of them are really similar in numbers. But essentially what I'm looking at is how much money someone would need to spend to meet their basic daily needs in USD. I'm using USD for both sides. Sorry, Aussies, but it's crypto we're talking about. So I'm using USD for both sides. Now, I'm looking at the basic needs that they need, and then I'm comparing that to how much you could possibly earn in ILV every year, and then how many tokens you would need to sustain a basic lifestyle. This is like talking like on the poverty line, not your extravagant driving Lamborghinis, eating pizza every day. I don't know what you want to do, but this is looking at the basic needs side of things. I'm looking at 3 high end and 3 low end. I picked states that I know, but I did learn a bit about United States geography when doing this. I don't know all the states. I don't know how you guys do this. So many of them. Australia has 8. I'm pretty sure Australia has 8. Let's go with that. So the 6 states I'm looking at, I believe, are New York, California, Washington D.C. is the high end, and on the low end, I can't remember. You'll see in a minute. So some ones I recognize. I think there's like Nevada in there. I like Nevada. I want to go visit. If anyone lives in Nevada, let me know. I'll come and chill at your place. I'd love to visit. So Australia, I used to have a data sheet here that told me all the incomes and things you need based on if you were renting. It breaks it all down here. Trust me, I got the data. For some reason, the page isn't loading today, but you get the idea. So what stats am I looking at and am I breaking down? So the key ones here are the initial token staked and the annual revenue generation. I'll talk through them in just a second. The other 2 are tokens compounding inflation and tokens you have staked. That is for a different section of this video. Watch to the end if you want to understand how many tokens you might need in 5 or 10 years instead of just today, or like just as soon as Illuvium launches, right? So that's also some really interesting data. Don't forget to stay tuned for that one. So totals tokens staked. Now on the low end, I've got 6 mil. On the high end, I've got 8 mil. We're closer to about 7 at the moment, but if token unlocks keep going the way they do, we could easily hit 6 mil, SRV burning and so on. It's very possible to have 6 mil tokens staked for a large portion of RevDiz and things like that. I don't think it will be. I think it will be closer to 7 and 5, but on the high end, I've got 8 mil because with the 1 mil in-game yield tokens and the almost 400k SRV2 burned, very hard to hit that 8 mil mark. And the balance of pool 600 mil. So I don't think we can actually hit the 8 mil mark anymore, or not in the near future. So that's a very good bracket at the top as a boundary. So I'm looking at my Drake equation. If you haven't seen the video, go check it out. I break down exactly how much revenue I think Illuvium could pull in. And I'll be updating that video in the future for those of you interested in that. But I'm pulling that exact number, and I'm going to be using this in a lot of future videos. So if you haven't checked out the Drake equation video, then go check it out. It has a pretty decent impact, but you don't need to if you don't want to. So I've looked at that. I've got a conservative estimate at 100 mil annually for Illuvium to be generating. I've got a moderate at 300 mil. I think we hit these 2 easy, maybe not in the first year, but we definitely hit them in my opinion. Extreme, we're looking at 2 billion. Okay, that seems extreme to some, but considering Blizzard on average pulls 5 to 6 bill, and I mean, they're on a decline. I think it's very possible, especially if gaming as a whole grows. 2 bill is not out of the question as the metaverse develops, so worth considering that as well. So let's just break them down nice and simply. By American state, looking at Drake, we're looking at about 300 tokens on the higher end in general. For some of the more expensive states like Washington and California, you're getting over the 400 token mark. On the lower ends, you're getting just over 200, which really isn't that far out of reach. I think 200 tokens is just over 10K or just under 10K now. And 250 tokens is about 10.5 USD. So 10.5K USD, which is reasonable for some people, not for myself and many others, I'm sure, but it's in the realm of possibility, which I think is really interesting to look at. Although the Drake estimate, many would probably assume is a bit on the extreme side, and people would much rather the conservative side. If we start to look at the conservative side, even on the cheaper end, you're looking at 1,800 tokens. On the high end, you're going over 3,000. Obviously, most probably wouldn't be able to manage that. But if you could, and you think this data is interesting, then obviously be considerate of your own financial situation. So tokens required moderate is where we're starting to get into the really realistic situation, in my opinion. And you're looking at about just over 1,000 for the high end of the American states, and at about the just over 500 mark for some of the low end states, which isn't too bad. I don't know, that's closer to 20, 25K, which is a lot of money, believe me. But it's definitely something people could go for. But if the token price appreciates, then obviously that would be significantly more. And at the extreme end, for the high-end states like Washington or California, you might only need about 150 tokens or even about 120. And you're getting lower at the cheaper states or the states with lesser costs for living, and you're at about 80 tokens at the low end, which is pretty fascinating. But again, that's a very extreme case. So definitely take that one with a grain of salt. Okay, so if we're looking at the Australian states, and let me move my camera down a bit. If we're looking at the Australian states, the two high-end ones are Victoria and New South Wales. Obviously, New South Wales outbands it a little bit. Those of you that live in Australia will know that people make jokes about Sydney being an expensive place to live. I make fun of my mate all the time, but it's got plenty of merits as well. And I think that's mostly just in the CBD in their central business district that is quite expensive. And I think it's quite affordable in the outer areas. Melbourne is actually really expensive to live. As for the Victoria statement there, and we've actually got quite a few other smaller cities that are coming up in price as well. So there's a lot of growth in Australia, and it's getting more and more unaffordable to get a house, not much unlike some other countries in the world. So low end staked for the Drake equation, you're looking at about, at the low end, you're looking at 150 tokens. Compared to America, it's significantly lower. Obviously, our Aussie dollar compared to the US dollar is a bit of an impact here. If we get up to where we were, then it's going to start looking actually a lot more similar to what the American ones are looking at. But at the moment, a lot cheaper. And the high ends there in Sydney, it's about 350, or New South Wales, and about 250, 280 in Melbourne as well. So that's quite interesting to see. For the conservative estimates, you're looking at almost 2,500 for New South Wales. In Victoria, you're looking at almost 2K, a lot lower than New South Wales, which does surprise me. And then for some of the other ones, some of the lower end ones, you're looking at about just over 1,000 tokens. So still out of reach for most people, I would expect. Tokens required on the moderate end, so what most would consider realistic, at least in the first 2 years. You're looking at about 400 tokens at the low end, which is still quite a bit, but not out of reach for many people, obviously always considering your own financial situation. And at the higher end, you're hitting about the 600 mark of tokens required to live comfortably and I guess not have to work if you're filling your basic needs, but you would still want higher income than that, obviously. At the extreme end, you could be looking at about under 100 tokens in Melbourne, which would be the dream. Just over 100 in Sydney, and at the lower end, even like 50 tokens might be able to help you get by. It's really crazy to think how much $2 billion in revenue could do for ILV token holders. It's wacky to think about some of the numbers that could come out of that. Obviously, there's a lot of other factors to consider, and this isn't like exact science. I'm very close. I'm estimating a lot of these figures for effect and to kind of just explain the gist of it a bit better. I think when I keep some of the stuff simpler, it's a lot easier to understand, and the core principles and concepts are really how you get far and really how you push yourself to learn more in this entire industry. So the next thing we'll look at is tokens you have staked. Now I'm going to put 300. It's very, very high. Maybe I'll go 200 this time. And I've got interesting two numbers here. And you guys have probably noticed these at the start. 15% token compound and 8% inflation. The idea here is that the costs of living are going to increase. That's inflation. I've got that at 8% because that's what the US economy has at the moment. I'm not sure what it is in Australia. I don't think it's much better. At about 8% inflation, or what they say it is, right? Tokens compounding, this is a really arbitrary number. I didn't really calculate what it could be. It's probably higher than this for all I know, but even on Ethereum, you get about 10-15% compounding annually, which is pretty good, but I'm saying 15% over the year. Now, given RevDiz is every single day, It could actually be significantly higher than that because you're getting it monthly, weekly, whatever you want. But I've got it at 15%, about double what inflation is. And what this is going to tell me is how it changes over the years. So at the start, you're pretty much only able to afford with your, what did I say, it's your 200? With your 200 tokens, you're only really able to afford on the extreme revenue side, and the Drake side of it, you're very close to it for the Australian states, okay? As you get lower in here after 5 years, the Drake equation figures start to really come into it, and you start to afford even more and more, and the lower end states on the American side of things as well. And then as you get deeper, you start to afford, after 10 years of all the inflation and everything taken into account, you start to get really close to being able to afford some of the moderate estimates in terms of revenue. Now, obviously, a lot of that is quite guessy and estimation and that sort of thing, but it's just interesting to consider that if you keep restaking your tokens, eventually you will just increase your power to earn that revenue and to be able to afford to live in these different places even after inflation. I guess the big concept there is that really in just anything in general, making sure that your money is working for you and increasing at a rate higher than inflation can be extremely valuable. But also there's a lot of risk in that. And that's the reason a lot of bad things happen. But there's an inherent risk with everything you do, especially when it comes to investing. So always consider your own financial situation and never over leverage or put yourself in a situation where you might have to sell some of those assets and things like that. Always be safe and conservative and make sure that you are safe first. Okay, I cannot stress that enough. I know I talk a lot of stuff in my videos, but please make sure you're safe. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I will put the spreadsheet in the description down below. Hopefully pin comment if I remember. We'll see how we go. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. Have a good day.